Our final project is on Uber. We're going to be going over how it relates to our class and, of course, information science and the technology associated with it. So in terms of overall background of Uber, as we all know, it is a rideshare company that I'm sure most of us have used at one point or another. So it started to become a thing in December 2008. Both the co-founders of Uber, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, had difficulty while in Paris. They were trying to hail a cab. And they really struggled with hailing a cab and getting the ride they needed from point A to point B. So instead of just accepting that as the way things are, they wanted to revolutionize taxi cabs essentially. So a few months later, they founded Uber Cab. They deemed it a solution to problems people were facing in terms of hailing cabs, where riders could just open up an app, say, "Hey, I want a ride," and then they get a car right to their destination to take them to their destination. Now, after they introduced this idea a little over a year later, in July 2010, they had their first Uber ride in San Francisco. The company then continued to grow and expand the amount of cities that they served. Of course, when they first started off, they just started in San Francisco, then a few more cities came about, and to this day, we are at over 600 cities, and that is even double what they were in May 2017, where at that point they had recorded about 300 cities that they had service in and recorded over 5 billion trips worldwide, really revolutionizing the way people move when it comes to taxi cabs and ride sharing. Now, we talk a lot about how it relates to taxi cabs. Now, of course, the similarities are a driver picks up a rider, drops them off at their destination. And then, of course, both have fares that are generally based on the distance and time. While those fares may be different, they both have a set system for how people are charged. Some key differences are that Uber's app-based. So riders request a ride with their smartphone, and then a driver comes and picks them up versus trying to put up your hand and hailing a cab or having to call a taxi cab service. It's all very easy. Just via a few taps and you have a ride, which is pretty cool. Uber also generally tends to have lower costs for rides overall, with the exception of when they're in the surge pricing. Now, this is debatable and it varies city by city, but I know for a fact that in Chicago, Uber is a lot cheaper than the local cabs. Uber now shows what fare you pay prior to requesting the trip. So taxi cabs do not have this. You kind of just pay as you go, unless you have a flat rate trip to the airport or something like that. So that's a pretty neat feature too, since Uber did face a lot of backlash for their surge pricing. Now, in terms of the information technology that's associated with Uber, Uber uses a lot of mapping software to make sure their drivers know where to go and to make sure that they get to the riders. So otherwise, there's not really a good business model there. Uber also uses a database centered around MySQL. They found that other database types didn't seem to handle exactly what they wanted. More detail can obviously be gone into that if you wanted to research that further. Uber also has a Web 2.0 design centered around the user. So with that, it's a very easy to use app, just a few taps and you have a ride. Very, very simple. It's really harder to hail a cab for sure, rather than just request a ride in the app. And you can even avoid raising your phone to your ear, which is pretty cool, meaning that you would just have to look at your phone and, again, tappity-tap and you have a ride. And then Uber's expanding. They're using cloud computing, and companies like Google and Amazon are trying to buy some of the data they have, which has some ethical implications with it, of course. They're trying to know a little bit more about how you behave, where you're taking rides to, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, Google and Amazon can both gain from that in terms of that data. Then, of course, all the information is transferred within the app between the driver and the customer. Now, of course, with any big application like Uber, there is a way they organize this entire system. So they collect data from every ride a customer has taken, which is arguably a gross invasion of privacy in terms of having all that data collected on where you go, who you're with, stuff like that. Uber has said that they use your personal data anonymously and in a form to closely monitor which features of the service are used most, so they can analyze usage patterns, determine whether they should continue offering a service in a certain location, and whether it's essentially good for their business. And they're, of course, say that they may share this information with third parties for industry analysis and statistics, so they can see how efficient they are compared to another ride-sharing company like Lyft or a taxi cab or everything like that. So in terms of supporting decisions, Uber uses the information to determine surge pricing as well. So they can see if there are a lot of rides being taken at one place, like after a concert, after like a Bucks game, Brewers game, anything like that, they can initiate surge pricing so that they can regulate the demand in terms of they need to capitalize on that. And if there's a higher demand, they can have a higher cost of how much their rides are going to cost, how much the drivers are going to get paid for, struggling through all the traffic of a concert and all the Uber drivers that are trying to get people from point A to point B from a big event like that. That's the most common spot where there's surge pricing, also during rush hour, everything like that. And then the system is an example of big data because of the sheer size and popularity of the company and how much data they collect and use in order to get you, again, from your pickup spot to your destination the most efficient and fast way possible. Uber also collects personal data and ride data, as we talked about, but again, it's anonymized and in a system to ensure confidentiality. And they, of course, use algorithms just as any application will. They collect, process, and distribute data so they can, again, do what you need to get you what you need in order to have a seamless trip. Now, in terms of the information institutions and professions, many cities were initially opposed to Uber's introduction. Taxi companies went on strike. They claimed Uber were stealing their clients. So there's a big dilemma there in early stages of Uber. But in reality, taxi employment has actually increased since 2010. Now, this is overall unexplained, but some ideas may be due to increase in competition. And then, of course, the taxi wages have gone down because they're trying to be more competitive with Uber in terms of pricing. So they're paying their drivers a little bit less because of it, which, again, has a lot of implications there. And of course, Uber uses standard data, location gathering, location services to determine your location, speed, everything like that. So you can see your driver's speeding, whether they're a good driver or not, how fast the driver's going to be getting to your destination, where they are, so you're prepared to step out of your house so you can hop in the car right away. Again, making it a very efficient process rather than calling and trying to figure it out like that. And then surge pricing, as we were talking about, is based in real time. So with that, it depends on the time of day, what kind of concert or event is going on, sporting event, et cetera, where they can charge more. And then that patent wasn't granted to Uber as well, so that people really only see surge pricing mainly on Uber. Lyft now does something similar, but of course we're mainly focusing on Uber here. And then in terms of the impacts it has on the information, this overall Uber system was designed for people looking to make a little bit of money on the side. In terms of the driver side of things, of course, for the riders, we had talked enough about that, where it benefits them as well, since there are a lot of times cheaper fares, and it's very easy to figure that out. In terms of having usability limitations, everything works pretty seamlessly from using the app. It automatically locates you on a map, gets your driver to you, everything like that. So most people with a smartphone, granted they have to have a smartphone, can use Uber. So if you don't have a smartphone or a smart device, it's going to be very difficult for you to use Uber unless you have a friend who does have one. So there is a little bit of a usability limitation when it comes to that. Now, in terms of privacy and security implications, the company overall manages data from not only the drivers but the customers as well. In November 2017, Uber did experience a security breach when hackers obtained some personal and travel data of over 57 million of their customers. Now, the head of security did pay the hackers to keep it quiet, so there was a big scandal when it came to that. Now, with the former head of the NSA and founder of his own cybersecurity firm, Matt Olson, Uber is focused on unifying the physical and online security teams. So they have really tried to improve on that, at least, but there clearly is still some problems when it comes to their overall security and the trust people have in the company. The system doesn't have any issues with users illegally posting material, since there's not really any material to post besides profile pictures. Unless somebody posted a false image, there really wouldn't be any issues, which there really aren't any notable ones, at least. The system has been criticized for use of user data because of a couple times about the researchers being hired to dig up information on some journalists based on some of the data they had on there. Uber's gotten in trouble with tracking their users after the trip has ended as well. So some customers reported that their location services stayed on for days or even weeks from the Uber app when Uber claims of tracking over the last 5 minutes. So a lot of people are really wondering what Uber is doing with all of that data. Uber has had a data breach, as we mentioned. The hacker had access to 57 million users. It exposed over 600,000 drivers' names and license numbers as well. Uber didn't announce this for over a year, which is like major information impact that there was, because again they paid off the hackers to keep it quiet. And then even in the past, they had another data breach. So clearly when you're a big company, you are a big target. So that's where people's information, both drivers and riders, can be impacted. People's information can be greatly impacted with having such a big system like this where data can be compromised so easily. So the system overall, we don't believe it's been ethical in how it's been implemented, just because Uber really is playing cover-up with how much data they have had compromised due to hacking instances and how long they've taken to come out and say, hey, we were hacked, which really was not very ethical, in that you leave people's information out in the open, don't even tell them so they know to be monitoring for it. Like a decent company would be able to do that. As people need to know if their information is at harm so they can take correct action. And of course, Uber's still having ethical problems to this day in terms of how their business model is and stuff like that. So thank you guys for watching our presentations. That's basically our overview of how it relates to information science, how Uber relates to information science and technology. These are our works cited. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we will be more than happy to answer them for you. Thank you.